Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns. It's 2019 and what do we do in this new glorious future year? We're going to look back 25 years to 1994, to the beginning of the career of a young man named Kevin Smith. And over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be looking at his entire directorial catalogue, as well as a few other offshoots that he's been involved in, writing, producing, that sort of thing. So, before we get into this, I'll introduce myself. I'm Alan, hello. And here with me, as always, is Saul Harris. That's silent Saul, of course. Took me a while to get that, so...
I'm waiting until the end. I'm going to say the best line of the show.
Say something really profound at the end.
Something that Kevin Smith thinks is very profound, but maybe isn't.
Yeah, of course. If you can keep your mouth shut for the entire show, I'll be very impressed. And also with us, joining us here for a second time, I believe, it's Paul Brear.
Oh, that makes me Jay. Snoogans?
Okay, so we're going to be looking at the entire Kevin Smith catalogue. We're starting this week with his first 5 films as a director, which is going to take us from Clerks to Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. It's kind of the first act of his career in terms of that viewer universe. Obviously, he has done stuff since then. Clerks 2 we'll be dealing with next week. Now, I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith in certain ways.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're the reason we're doing this, to be perfectly honest.
I'm going to clarify that. I think, not just that I'm a fan, but I think this is a very interesting career to look at. And I know you followed his career as well, because the way he's gone, we'll see this in a couple of weeks, but he's gone in an unusual direction now.
I think I discovered him roughly around that age when I was getting into films, as I think a lot of boys age, probably about 15 or so, do. Mm-hmm. My 15-year-old self, I think, was under the impression that he was a much, much more talented, perhaps intelligent man than maybe he actually is. Yeah. And I'm now over a decade older and have matured a lot, and I am revisiting many of these films for the first time, and well, we're gonna see how they hold up, aren't we?
Well, I think I'm on a similar sort of thing to you. Yes, having rewatched these films just in the last few days, I've definitely matured past them now. But not to go into too much detail yet, but I definitely still find things that I like about them. But yeah, I think you're right. I think Kevin Smith is really profound to 17-year-olds. And that's not a bad thing.
If you had spoken to 15-year-old me, I mean, I would have put him maybe only one notch below, the real filmmaker-y people, like Tarantino and that lot. I mean, I definitely wasn't under the apprehension that he was a Tarantino figure, but I thought of him as like a legitimate real filmmaker, whereas I think now I think of him more as, he's made quite a good career selling stuff to stoners. Good on him.
Well, my quick background, and I suspect Brear is going to be quite similar here because we're same age. Dogma came out when I was about 15. Now, I didn't see it at the cinema, but when I was like 16, 17 and really starting to get into films, that was the first... I remember renting it from the video store, and that was the first Kevin Smith film I saw. I loved it.
That was my first exposure. I had a media studies teacher at school put it on for the class at the end of the year, because he obviously he felt it was the most appropriate Kevin Smith film, obviously a fan of himself. I think he said something to the effect of his first film was the best one and it's all been downhill from there, but you might enjoy this. That teacher later turned out to be a paedophile, just unrelated bit of trivia for you. I don't think I really liked it all that much. Something about it obviously got my attention enough to look into his other films, but yeah.
I mean, I think for me, I think it might have been Al that actually introduced me either to Dogma or certainly to Kevin Smith. Because when you were getting into film, I suppose I was watching a lot of films as well. We watched a lot of films together back then. So yeah, Dogma was probably my first taste as well. And then like you kind of thought, this is good, I'll watch the
I do
rest.
think it was one of those films that I watched and was like, oh, I want to share this with other people. It was like, for a time, it was right up there with my favourite films.
It was number one on your list. I remember it on your
There
wardrobe
you go.
wall.
Yeah, there you go.
That's very surprising.
I also distinctly remember there was a brief period where I had ITV Digital when digital boxes first came out, before ITV Digital went up the spout after about 2 years. On the back of that, I had Film 4, and this was really when I was getting into films. And I would back then you got a little booklet which was just Film 4, and I had all their listings, and I meticulously went through it, and I was discovering things. This was a real big part of my discovery of film. I know they did a double bill one night of Clerks and Chasing Amy. I recognised the name from Dogma. I thought, right, I'm on that. And I watched those two films, and that was me in, right? I was sold on Kevin Smith then. The good thing about Kevin Smith is that he is extremely vocal and extremely public about his life and his opinions. And so, because I'm interested in him, I've listened to a lot of stuff about him, and I know a lot about his thing. And so there's a real peek behind the curtain here. As in, the curtain's been ripped off the rails and thrown on the ground.
I think that's what put me off him. Honestly, I used.
Yeah, we'll come on to that, but yeah, I definitely. I agree with what you said earlier, that you kind of start to realise that he's not as clever as you sort of imagine he is at first.
Yeah.
He's great at writing like emotional stories and characters. He's great at writing what he knows, which is like falling hopelessly in love with someone and then breaking up with someone and dealing with that. Like, he knows how to deal with all that.
Being extremely insecure about women.
Oh, fuck yeah. About everything. Extremely insecure about everything that he could be.
Yeah, there's a beat in every single one of these films, I think, where the protagonist finds out how many people, like, a woman they're interested in has had sex with.
Well, Chasing Amy is entirely about that. Like, that was literally his inspiration for writing it. It was he had a girlfriend who was more sexually experienced than him, and it made him feel insecure. So we're looking at Kevin Smith as a writer-director here, but let's face it, he's a writer. The directing is
yeah.
At best pedestrian.
I've got a lot to say about that. 'Cause again, I what I used to say about him was that, yeah, he's a great writer, and the direction's just kind of functional just to get it made. Rewatching the films, I think that's very generous. I don't know. I think he's actually. I'm going to be making an argument that he's quite a poor director as we go along.
I mean, if you listen to any of the commentaries on any of the films, basically Ben Affleck particularly rips into him quite regularly for just how shit he is at directing. The fact he's got no vision, everything is essentially just a camera in front of two people speaking. I think Kevin Smith's quite open about that as well, to be honest.
Well, if we go back to the start here, Kevin Smith. He went to, like, he'd finished high school and all that. He hadn't quite figured out what he was doing with his life. He ended up going to film school. He went to a film school in Canada, where he met, amongst other people, Scott Mosier, who has then become his producing partner. Now, he dropped out of this film school after like one semester because he was like, oh, it's just like film theory. I just want to film stuff, man. So he decided it was not practical enough for him, I think. I think he wanted to just learn how to think. But basically, and bear in mind this is in America, it's actually Canada, but he was American. So he was paying for this quite a lot of money, and he decided, I'd rather take this money and just make a film. It's a ballsy move. It's a naive move, but it's one that very much paid off.
Yeah. Well, again, this is... I think I've had this discussion with you before, Alan, because I remember listening to him getting very sort of self-righteous about how he went out and did it for himself and how everyone should go out and do it. And it's like, no, you did something profoundly stupid
and irresponsible,
and you got lucky. And there's probably
extremely lucky.
There's so many people who do the exact same thing and it doesn't pay off, even though they might make a better film. Like, it happens. Clerks isn't, it's not the highest bar in the world. And yeah, he just got incredibly, incredibly lucky because he one of the things he did was he took out every single credit card he could possibly get in his name and maxed them all out. So had this incredibly ballsy move not paid off, he would be putting himself into insane debt for life.
He took on a lot more debt than he really could have. Because he worked at this video store, so he claimed he was the manager of the video store. And when the banks rang up, he would say, "Oh yeah, I'm the owner. Kevin Smith, yeah, he's the manager. He earns like $70,000 a year. Yeah, he's really well paid." And so they gave him loads of credit. So he just lied about how much he earned. So he managed to get much more credit than really his financials would have allowed.
And I think there's a tendency when the story's recounted to just think, I think a lot of people read it as, oh, what a savvy guy, what a smart man. And it's like, the more you get to know about him, it's like, no, he was really fucking stupid. He's just very lucky. And yeah, fair enough. There is definitely talent there.
His timing was just right as well, wasn't it? It was just that era where you could take a camera and you could film something. Like a few years before, you couldn't do that, and a few years later, everyone was doing it. He was just kind of just good enough at just the right time for it to just work out.
It was, yeah, exactly. It was the perfect time. Kevin Smith dropped out of film school. Scott Mosier decided to finish film school because he was learning something. And so Kevin Smith went away and wrote a script, and Scott Mosier said, "Oh, you finish your script and I'll produce it for you. You can direct it, I'll produce it." David Klein, who was another person they met at the school, he was the cinematographer, and that's how Clerks came about. Kevin Smith managed to raise about $27,000 along with his savings and credit card fraud.
Sold all his comics as well, didn't he? Something like that.
Yeah, he sold his comic book collection, which was obviously like his prized possession, but also the only thing he had that was worth anything. So he he put everything into this. And like you say, Sol, a stupid thing to do. Really. I don't know, why didn't his parents stop him? Why didn't anybody stop him doing this? There was 0.001% chance he would ever make that money back. And he did. But I guess the idea, what they were trying to do, was make something that would get them noticed and then get them some money to make another film. That's generally why people make these little low-budget films. No one would expect the film itself to do well and make money. So, Kevin Smith is 23, 24, something like that. He's working in a convenience store, local store, and so he writes a script about a 23-year-old who works in a convenience store who's dissatisfied with his life. It's about falling in love and being insecure about your girlfriend. And then you've got...
I don't know if there's any falling in love.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either, to be honest.
It's about being in a relationship that's perhaps going a bit stale and whether or not it's worth maintaining it.
Well, this is another recurring theme of Kevin Smith's work. The concept of love with anybody you can get it with.
That nails it.
If you get someone in, nail them down. Just nail that shit down.
There's a recurring theme in Kevin Smith's films where he likes to kind of do the sort of Tim Burton thing, put his lover at the time in the film, and just kind of. But then he always has this thing of, really...
At least Tim Burton had the dignity to go out with actresses, though.
Clerks. Or Clerks, as it is occasionally known in the UK.
Yes.
So the central story in Clerks is Dante, who, as we say, is this sort of frustrated young man working in a convenience store. He has love issues. He's sort of going out with one girl, pining for his ex. That's the through story, really. And then it's surrounded with what is essentially sketches. It's very sketchy, but it holds together. It doesn't feel too disjointed to say how much it is.
I should add, Clerks is very much the... I think I would have said it was my favourite Kevin Smith film for a while. We'll see how that how that goes as we get into these. But it's the one I bought on DVD. I got the Clerks 10th anniversary special edition DVD set, and it's the one I've returned to the most by a mile out of all of his films. Most of his other films I think I've watched once, and I'm coming back to them now for the first time. So,
well,
You know what my first note here is?
Go on.
I started watching it and it just hit me. This movie is peak Alan. It's never struck me until now. This is the most Alan film ever made. Barely any plot, barely anything actually
Just
happens.
people talking.
Just people talking in black and white for no reason.
You pretend it's
Well, there
happening.
is budgetary reasons, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the film's in black and white. And
Badly
just in case anyone
acted.
doesn't know.
Oh, my first note is actually
Dialogue.
the dubbing. Oh god, the dubbing. Oh.
Well, that because they didn't really know what they were doing.
Oh, yeah,
So like they
appreciate
recorded
it.
the sound badly. they filmed it in a store, but they had to film it at night.
That's why the shutters
And
are
he very
down, isn't it?
cleverly, yeah, he comes up with quite a nice little
Yeah, it
idea
works.
to the shutters are down. It's
Yeah, it's
beautiful.
great. Yeah.
Well, my first note was this opening montage. We start with Dante getting a call to say he needs to come into work, even though he thought he had the day off. You have this opening montage of him sort of getting to the store, opening up, doing the papers, blah, blah, blah. It's actually quite long, but I think it works really nicely. It sort of sets up this humdrum, monotonous life
Yeah.
without being boring. There's a couple of little gags in there just
Yeah,
to keep
yeah,
you
yeah.
going. And I think that's really nice. I think it just sets up the film beautifully.
Yeah.
Now that is good direction. That's not writing, is it? That's a nice little bit of,
Yeah.
filmmaking, editing or whatever, but that's just a nice little touch.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
another thing, and I guess this kind of ties back into the black and white stuff again, but weirdly, out of the first bunch of films we've looked at for this episode, I think this is by far the best shot of all of his films, cinematography-wise. I'll kind of elaborate on it as it goes, but I think there are some actually quite nice shots in this film. There's some nice bits of framing. It feels like the what's he called, the cinematographer? David Klein. It feels like David Klein's, really kind of put some effort in and really tried to just frame up a nice shot here and a nice shot there.
Well-
And a lot of it's very functional, but
Well, yeah. Well, what I really picked up on, which I've never noticed before, and this goes for the first three films, which David Klein was the DOP on. A lot of wide shots, just really long takes of wide shots, not going into close-ups very often, and that could be a budgetary thing because it's like, hey, let's just shoot this as simply as possible.
I think
But
absolutely with
having
Clerks, yeah.
having done that, they make it work, and it does give the film a different feel to most things.
I think it works really well in Clerks, so I'm not so sure about the subsequent films, but yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely in Clerks, because it does feels like you're watching a play sometimes. There's this long sort of dialogue between the characters, and the acting feels more like you're watching a play. It's a little bit because it's
Amdram.
not
Yeah.
because it's a little bit more amateur acting. It's not this kind of film acting. It really but those long takes, those just wide shots, really help that.
Yeah, the acting in this film, I mean, to say it's basically just friends
It's just his
and
mates, isn't it? Really?
relatives
It's-
being pulled in,
Yeah.
like it could be worse, but there's not a single person in this film who gives a great performance.
I don't-
I think a lot of the dialogue is sort of painfully written as well, just overly written, so clearly like. So it's a really awkward mixture of people who aren't the best actors not being able to make dialogue that doesn't sound very natural. It's very. I don't know.
I don't think Dante is good, but I don't think Randall's too bad. I think
Randall is by far the best
he's
performance in the film. Yeah.
he's an okay actor, I suppose, or he's certainly okay in that role. It's not like I've seen him in an awful lot else. But
Well, the main actors, the main sort of primary characters, were kind of cast from like local amateur dramatics groups and that sort of thing. So he went to find people who were actors, but they weren't being paid anything like that. So it's like, that's what he could get. And then anyone who only has like one or two lines, that's one of his friends, and that's fine. But yeah, Brian O'Halloran, who plays Dante Hicks, not great.
no, he's not.
But
He's-
he's not.
He's passable. Within
Yeah,
the context
exactly.
of this film, it's fine. He gets away with it. Yeah.
And he does encapsulate that character very nicely. I'll give him that. Jeff Anderson, who plays Randall Graves, he's
got a certain charm to him.
he's got a certain something, and it's encapsulated perfectly in that character. It's like the character's been written for him.
Some of these guys pop up in subsequent Kevin Smith films, and I think
All.
he is the one person who pops up in subsequent films and actually holds his own against real actors. Most of the others, it's sort of like, ooh, that's not an actor.
But the role of Randall was Kevin Smith wrote for himself.
Yeah, you couldn't
which
do
is
it.
why he gets all the best lines. And then I think he decided like, I can't do such a big part and direct as well.
Well, apparently they were.
I'll take a
filming
little part
for like 4 or 5 hours. Like obviously, like you said, at night, and basically he was working at the shop through the day. So he basically didn't sleep for a month while they filmed it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that was why that guy has the best lines. He's the funny one because that's what Kevin Smith has. That's what Kevin Smith is secure about in his life, is that he's the funny one, and that's all he's ever had in terms of his belief. So yeah, writing Dante as this character that is obviously him and all his fears and anxieties, and then writing this other character that is kind of his confidence and his kind of fuck you attitude, which is the sort of person who would chuck all their money into making a film,
Right.
and he does have this sort of confidence in himself. So yeah, that's why I really like this dynamic between the two of them. I think that's possibly why Kevin Smith has come back to them on a couple of occasions. But I mean, I really like their dynamic, the two of them. I think Jeff Anderson's great.
I think the one who plays Veronica is one of the better ones. But I think everyone other than those just named is pretty poor, actually. Including Jay and Silent Bob, who pop up again later, and
I don't think there's
a
any
hell of a
acting
lot better
on Jay's part.
Well, that's it. Jay is like just point the camera at him and let him do what he does. And
well, this is what I was going to say, actually, because you've got to appreciate this is Kevin Smith's first film as well as a director. I don't think he's getting the best out of these people as a director.
Yeah,
and I don't think and I think you can see these same actors get better later on.
Oh yeah.
And that's
you definitely can,
probably more to do with Kevin Smith giving them something better to go on. I can very much believe, and judging on stuff that Bruce Willis has said, that Kevin Smith is very much a kind of let the actor just get on with it themselves kind of person, and then go, oh, this is what I wanted when I wrote it, and then like hope that they do it. Well, I want to just voice my major complaint about the film, and it's Kevin Smith writes very good dialogue, and he writes these very witty characters, but particularly in this film, every character is the same. They have the same voice. They make the same witty comments. They have the same type of voice, you know?
Yeah. Particularly noticeable when it's a tobacco gum salesman, or just like a bit part character who pops into the shop for one scene and he's talking in the exact same way as these other... Because you can kind of buy, well, these people
all
are
these
friends
kids,
and they hang out together.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But yeah, it's just like not everyone is the witty one, you know. You just need like one character who's that quick talking, like witty guy, or maybe two of them are friends and they can bat off each other. But it's just, everyone speaks with this Kevin Smith's voice, you know, or the voice that Kevin Smith would talk with if he could write everything down before he said it. And that's a naive writing. That's kind of inexperienced writing. We've all done that.
Isn't Silent Bob jarringly skinny in this film as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of jokes about him being fat, and he's just not.
Yeah.
Oh, it's almost like he grew into the role.
Yeah, it's really odd. I in my memory, he was always fat, but
yeah, in this film, Randall's also in my mind. Randall's fat. No, sorry, Dante. Dante's fat.
Dante's got a very
later.
Dante's got a very sort of chubby, round face.
Yeah, really. The whole scene with the trainer.
It looks like
perfectly.
It looks like his neck on his shirt's too tight and his head's kind of bursting out of it. So, Alan, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to suck your own dick?
Terrible time to take a drink.
Yeah, of course. Everyone has.
Cool. So you're not at all repressed. Good.
Almost broke my back. It's that sort of thing that Kevin Smith makes it okay to talk about.
Yeah. Did you reach at all?
Yeah.
Just successfully, or like just the tip?
I tell you, no. When I was younger, yeah, my problem is now that I'm not flexible enough. I'm a bit too chubby to do it anymore. But when I was a young live man, and yeah, it's all right.
That's weird. That is weird.
Yeah. My dog does that. I'm never going to look at that again in the same way.
Just imagine, it's going to be like a cartoon, and Alan's head appears on the dog.
It's one of those things that it's like, yeah, you kind of manage it, but it's too awkward to really get anything out of it. It's too sort of physically uncomfortable. Yeah. So it's not something you really do. It's just sort of, I wonder. Yeah, I can do that.
One of my complaints with this film is, and bear in mind, I don't think Jay and Silent Bob are nearly as well defined here as they become. Mm-hmm. I think Jay and Randall are like far too similar in this film to justify being two separate characters. There's no real. They both just feel like these anarchic figures floating around, spouting like funny lines, and they become very different as the films progress and what have you. But
yeah, should we talk about Jason Mewes quickly? So Jason Mewes is he's a little bit younger than Kevin Smith and his friends. He was a friend of his, but he was like this young kid who was like he's like from a really dodgy home. Like his mum was a crackhead and all this sort of thing. So Kevin Smith met Jason Mewes because Kevin Smith worked at like a down and outs kind of youth shelter thing where they took young kids like and kept them busy through the day, so they weren't just out on the streets. And Kevin Smith was like a worker there on the basis that he was like 5 years older and therefore responsible. And just found this kid to be a really interesting and funny character because the Jay of Jay and Silent Bob is basically Jason Mewes. That's just what he was like. And he just go around talking about sucking cocks all the time and how everyone's gay and he's not gay and he loves the clip. But in Clerks, Jay, I mean, he's weak and not even like that funny. Is just, like Saul says, it's just this sort of anarchic element that just drops in every now and then.
I think it's because, like I say, Clerks is the film that I kind of judge Kevin Smith based on. It's the one I'm most familiar with, like significantly so. So I think of Jay and Silent Bob in Clerks, and they're just not that good in this one compared to later films. So that's probably what it comes down to.
Just to address a couple of elements of the plot of Clerks before we move on, because I think it's important because we're going to sort of, like we say, find some recurring themes here. Dante has a girlfriend that he's not that bothered about, but he's settled and it's easy and it's convenient and she brings him food, which in Kevin Smith's mind is all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a million fine-looking women in the world, Alan, and most of them don't bring you lasagna at work. So
they'll just cheat on you.
Exactly.
Most of them just cheat on you, yeah.
Yeah.
It's aged well, that, hasn't it? This film, certainly watching it again now, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way a bit. And I think ultimately the message of this film is to settle. And I don't like that.
Oh, yeah.
And that really rubs me the wrong way. It's like, no, fuck notions of love and romance. Settle for safety. Settle for familiarity.
Certainly on the romantic side, but like we've said, he's got these two characters which are basically him arguing with himself. Yeah, the one side of him
and very cleverly, Kevin Smith casts two women who look almost exactly the same. I can't tell apart.
But like he's saying, settle for love, which is the place where he's not confident. But also, every character in this is pushing the main character to go back to school to learn something, and we never does. But obviously, it's only a day-long film. But everyone's pushing him to do more with his life, just not in love.
I think if Kevin Smith does something very well, and we're going to see this in the later films as well, it's that he'll create a balanced argument. What I think it might be is fence sitting rather than a deliberate kind of debate on the issues. I think it's more just he can't quite decide himself what he wants, and so that's what he writes about. We see it in Dogma when it's about religion. We see it in Clerks about love. We see it in Chasing Amy about relationships and all that sort of thing.
And we see it in Jay and Silent Bob about beating up people who slag you off on the internet.
Yeah. But I think that's actually what he does well, is that he doesn't really provide any answers.
Yeah,
he kind of just throws the questions at you and does show both sides. We've got Randall there saying, look, yeah, you're a fuck up, I'm a fuck up too. What the hell? Like, just enjoy it. Whereas Dante wants something more but won't push for it, be it his career, be it his love, be it whatever. Whereas Randall kind of understands what he is and has accepted it. That doesn't mean he's happy with it necessarily. Jay and Silent Bob don't know what they are until they're happy with what it is. So yeah, I think actually that's what Kevin Smith is very good at. I don't know how deliberate that is, if it's just his natural tendency to not want to make a decision or not want to create a full argument or fall on one side.
Yeah.
But whatever, it works. So I think that's what we see in Clerks. I think we do see, because we never quite get a resolution of what Dante's going to do with between these two women, because he has one that, is prepared to give up a lot for him, the one he should settle with, even though he obviously doesn't want to. The one he really loves, which is obviously not going to work out because she's not ready for it, but then she's saying, "Oh, maybe I'm ready for it now." And ultimately, he decides to go back to this other girl, and the circumstances take her away. And so he's like, "Oh, well, I've still got this other girl, haven't I?" Dante does not come out of this as a good person.
No, not at all.
Someone who's made a decision. He hasn't really changed much over the course of this day. He's still indecisive.
I think that's part of what rubs me slightly the wrong way. Is I think you're meant to be on his side the whole way through, and I think when his girlfriend's like smacking him across the head and saying, "What the fuck do you think you're doing, trying it on with this other woman?" You're meant to kind of think, "Oh, for God's sake, leave him alone. He changed his mind." And it's like, no, he's behaved like a little piece of shit. Like,
he's not just
well
trying
within
it
a right.
on.
And he didn't change his mind. Circumstances took the option away from him.
She's well within like her right to be furious with him, and like the film should end with him losing both women for being a piece of shit. But and I think he gets his just desserts insofar as 10 years down the line, he's still working practically the same job and hasn't made anything out of his life. But
stuck with a harridan of a wife.
Yeah, well,
the same problems.
Overall, I think all the individual scenes that make up Clerks are good and entertaining, but it does start to drag near the end. The arc isn't quite enough to prevent that, but to say where it came from and the very modest tools they were working with, I think it is quite a remarkable debut film, certainly amongst its peers. So, I think it's remembered for a reason, and might as well go into a rating from there. I give this one an 8 out of 10, which might be surprising because I feel like I've been quite negative about it, but that's largely just trying to address the balance a bit, I think.
Yeah. Well, I feel I'm just going to echo what you just said there. I gave it a 9 out of 10.
Oof.
I'm sure this has been a 10 out of 10 in my history, but it's a 9 out of 10 for me.
I think it's been a 9 out of 10 in my history, and I've bumped it down, yeah.
I think for me, just you two both kind of look at films slightly differently to me, certainly from a filmmaker's perspective. I sort of feel like you're maybe forgiving it a little bit just for knowing the fact
absolutely,
that it's, which is fine. Whereas I don't have that. I still think it's a good film. I think it stands up, but it's a 7, I would say. It's a middling 7 to me, because I don't look at it the same way as you two do.
I think that's very fair. I think I think I am absolutely giving it a bonus point for coming from such a modest place and its impact on cinema and blah 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 blah. But yeah, I think that's very fair.
The short version of the story of the next step of Kevin Smith's career is that Clerks got discovered by Miramax, who were on a trail at the time to be pumping out these little indie films and really pushing them. And we do have the Weinsteins to thank for Kevin Smith's career. We're not allowed to like them anymore, but that's Harvey Weinstein anyway.
I don't think anyone really liked them in the first place. They were always sort of
as a person, no, but they have done a lot for the film industry, particularly little indies in the 90s. So what Clerks was intended to do, get you noticed, it certainly did, and they were given a budget to make another film.
Quite a large budget.
They were given $6 million, and which even they thought was too much.
Because Kevin Smith's quite wide about saying, we don't need this much money. Please don't give us this much money. Yeah,
because he quite rightly realised, and this is something he'd come back to in his career, and in fact run away from in his career. The more money you've got, the more responsibility you've got, the more people you've got looking over your shoulder, telling you what to do, making sure you're not doing anything that could possibly go wrong. And I think that's a lesson he learned on Mallrats and never forgot until Cop Out. But and as we'll get to in a couple of weeks, that's where his career is at the moment. We'll come back to that. But Mallrats, they said, okay, look, you've got your finger on the pulse of the teenage comedy market. Right, as a teen comedy, we can be R-rated, we can put fucks in there and all sorts of stuff. Can have some titties in there, and we'll sell it to the stoner teenage crowd. And I mean, that's exactly what they did, really. Didn't do that well.
It's a very interesting sophomore project, really, to say he was in a position where he could probably do not anything, but he could probably have done something a lot more ambitious than this, which just feels... It's like a sitcom episode. It's not a bad film, but it's very unambitious.
I mean, it's essentially Clerks in a mall. I think Kevin Smith has said that. It's not that far removed from the same. You've said it already. There's repeated themes throughout all these films. But it's about two males. One who is, very much, do this. It doesn't matter. The other one who's very much worried about everything, who are discussing girls and about a breakup / not breakup. They've just gone to the mall and done Clerks with more money. With this weird theme behind it.
I don't think that's a bad idea necessarily. Like, this was nice. Let's do it properly and make a real film with some real money.
Oh, it worked for Sam Raimi.
And put a bit more action into the story and all that. I think it's a great concept. And just to, not to give too much away straight away, but for all its faults, I find Mallrats very funny, and I was laughing a lot at it.
I like Mallrats. That feels like I'm being hard on it when I start, but I like Clerks, and it wasn't made as well as I would like it to be from just a viewer perspective. I think Mallrats is obviously put together as a film a little bit better, and is essentially a similar thing. I
don't know if it is. That was one of my big issues with it. Rewatching it, I was surprised. I was really. I think my younger self just thought, the camera's like not wobbling.
It's colour.
It's in colour, therefore it's better.
But I suppose from my point of view, they're the kind of things that I'm looking at, and as a general viewer, not everything's better by any stretch. But
one of my first notes is maybe Clerks wasn't full of bad acting because of the lack of budget. Maybe Kevin Smith just can't direct actors.
Yes. Well, this is Can we? Let's
Because the acting in this film is shocking. It is bad. There are some good actors in this film who are not good. Like, I love Michael. Is he called Michael Rooker? What's his name?
Michael Rooker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rooker. Yeah.
Michael Rooker. I normally love. What is he doing in this film?
Well, actually, I think it's a really good example because Michael Rooker you can tell that is a good actor not quite knowing what they're doing, as opposed to, say, Claire Forlani, who's just shit. And I have seen her in other things, and she's not been that bad. But I've never seen her be good. Jeremy London is just totally the most average actor, and he's shit in this.
Jason Lee is I normally quite like him. I think he's normally very capable of doing this kind of role. Even here, I think he's kind of shit. And I don't know if this may be because was this like his first acting gig? Yeah, maybe there's an element of lack of confidence about what he's doing. But
I don't know about that. I might disagree with you there. I'm not saying it's good acting necessarily, but I think this whole film sits on the shoulders of Jason Lee. He's the thing holding this film up because, okay, he might not be the best actor, but he fits that character perfectly in the same way.
But I mean, not to
Randall in Clerks. I think he's perfect for that role.
Yeah.
And he crystallizes this film.
And I think it's a shame. I think he gives quite a bad performance within the like he gets away with it because he's likable and well cast, but like compare the performance he gives here to, without wanting to give too much away, compare his performance here to Chasing Amy. It's worlds apart.
I don't know if it's worlds apart. I think it's
I think it is
exactly the same character. No, I think his slightly more cartoonish caricature acting works in the context of Mallrats. It's a cartoony film.
Like another thing, Ben Affleck. I've sort of been led to believe he's a good actor because of all his recent well, not recent, but a lot of his more recent decisions. But this reminded me, oh yeah, he was kind of a joke, and everyone thought of him as a dreadful, shitty actor when he was younger. And
What?
No, I didn't.
No, that's not my memory
yes, he
of it.
did. Ben Affleck.
Yeah, I think maybe when you were younger, when he was going through that mid stage of like Gigli and all that crap.
Pearl Harbor
But
and all that
when
shit.
we were younger, he was sort of like, doing Good Will Hunting and Dogma, so we were seeing the sort of better side of it.
Well, we'll get to Dogma in a minute, but I think he's cartoonish and he's dreadful in this film. There's a scene.
Well, I think this film is cartoonish. I don't think it's deliberately directed to do that, but I think that's what Kevin Smith had in his mind, so that's what he got.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the nature of the film. It's a silly sort of, it's a very colourful, cartoony film.
It's a Looney Tunes cartoon. I mean, they literally draw blueprints and set up traps.
Yeah, on that note, I hate Jay and Silent Bob in this film. I cannot stand them. I think they are shit, and this is part of why... Oh, God. Their subplot is just irrelevant. There's no... It's just like, oh, let's just pop them in for the sake of it, get a few laughs. And they do that really fucking shit thing that I cannot stand where... And the Looney Tunes did it a lot. They'll go through a series of plans to do something, and something weird will happen that makes them all fail. And they never think, oh, let's just try the same plan again and not fuck it up this time, because that was going to work. They think, no, let's try a brand new, completely different plan every single time. It really aggravates me.
I mean, plans are also a little bit far-fetched. Just hit him with a sock full of coins.
That's the whole point, isn't it? It's like you say, it's a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yeah.
I think, obviously, if you've got to just go with that. And the fact that... What I will say about the script is that everything kind of ties in. Everything comes back. I don't think it is pointless. Because, they're integral to how the plot is resolved. And getting all that together.
I mean, plot is being a bit generous, honestly. It's
no, the plot is there, whether it's,
they're integral to, like, having grabbing a video tape behind the scenes and putting it in a plot. Like, I don't know. It feels very much like, how can we write them into everything else happening?
But that's fine. There's some comic characters that you want to write into this film. I love
it's just shit.
Kevin
like
Jane Silent Bob in this.
Really?
Well,
you love Silent Bob
I like
putting
Jay.
coins in a sock and then running across the mall, swinging his arms around.
I mean,
and then a child throws a train,
so I obviously did.
and the train goes like along the floor, and then he goes flying across the floor on the.
I think if you watch this film as if it's a cartoon and it all works, it's fine.
No, because it wouldn't be a very good cartoon.
I disagree with that.
I love old Looney Tunes cartoons because they're
actually all
actually
like that.
Fantastic.
They'd be fine. It's just that it's this whole kind of it's the main character and Brandy who's awful.
Yeah, the main problem with this is the main character is shit.
Yeah, the main plot is the issue.
Yeah, and it's a mixture of that and then Jason Lee sticking his hand down his arse and wiping it all over pretzels, and then Michael Rooker gurning and...
It's funny.
I don't think I've ever heard Alan laugh with such glee on this show.
We've tapped into his...
It really was. Rewatch it. I haven't watched this for years. And rewatching it, I was like, oh yeah, this is the shit one. I really laughed a lot watching this film. I enjoyed it a lot, and like I can see a lot. God, some of the acting is dreadful, but and again, all the characters speak with the same voice.
Yeah, I've made a note about my note here is just that the dialogue's funnier and more polished here, but it's never hilarious, and I personally much prefer the kind of raw, more realistic way that it kind of felt in Clerks. Like this just feels a bit more glossy, but I think that takes away from it. If anything, it's just you're less forgiving of it as a result, and therefore
it does feel like it's written rather than, like you say, that natural feel to it. Every character is able to just pull these big words out that realistically we all know when we use them, but we generally write them down rather than just using them in general conversation. And it does feel a little bit overwritten, I suppose.
Overwritten is, that's a good word. Lots of syllables.
You know that scene where Ben Affleck grabs the guy and like pulls him out into an alleyway and starts like punching him?
Oh, into the back, yeah.
Wasn't that just like watching Batman in Batman v Superman? just an angry man beating the shit out of a guy on the floor.
Yeah. Well,
apparently they cut that. It was like twice as long. Was like they just hit him loads and loads more than that, and they cut it down because they thought actually this is supposed to be like a comedy, and it's just someone beating someone half to death.
It's okay because he gets sent to prison to be raped, which was a stock joke in the 90s.
It was okay to make that joke.
It's actually a stock joke in Kevin Smith films.
We have our principal two characters. They have two girlfriends, both of which have broken up with them for different reasons. And so the plot is essentially them winning their girls back. One of them pretends he doesn't care. One of them really does.
You know what I found amazing, actually, was one of the one who breaks up with Jason Lee is because he's playing video games all day. And I was sort of imagining, he's on Call of Duty or some really, like Red Dead Redemption 2, some like really elaborate game. And then he's like, he refers to playing Sega, I think, at one point. It was like, oh yeah, this was set back when that would be like an 8-bit... like really old
playing hockey, wasn't he?
Yeah. It's like, I mean, those old games were fun, but I don't know if you quite lose your life to them in the same way.
Again, you're showing how young you are. We didn't. It's not like we went, oh yeah, this is fun. Now we'll go do something better. That's what we had.
I mean, the hours Brear and I spent playing Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. I can't believe.
Well, yeah, no, that was a time sponge, that game. To be fair,
Kevin Smith's a pretty loyal guy, and it's quite impressive, if anything, that they managed to keep the team together with Scott Mosiers there still producing. David Klein is still the DOP. Now that's a big surprise because you can put oh yeah, Scott Mosiers the producer. Here's another 5 producers to help you, and you always keep the director even if they aren't any good.
I think the cinematography is one of the big reasons this film is a bit lacking, honestly. I think it feels like someone who's not particularly adept at shooting a film, hasn't really got any sort of artistic eye, is very flat, very uninteresting to look at. There's often not a particularly good sense of like just what's around, like what the area you're looking at, and the sort of more action-oriented scenes are often a bit... you don't get a good sense of the space and everything. I don't think this film's well shot at all. I think it's one of the weakest elements of it. It really jumped out at me watching this the other night.
Well, it's a cinematographer who was extremely inexperienced, certainly inexperienced at this level. So I don't think it's that surprising, really. The fact that the studio allowed him to do it is surprising.
Yeah, I assumed it was the same guy who did Clerks, based purely on the fact that it was shit.
Well, and this was it. I think there's a lot of the similar things. These long shots, these wide shots. We see the same in Chasing Amy, which is David Klein as well. And again, I'm thinking, is that David Klein's influence? Because once he's gone, that's no longer there. I don't think Kevin Smith is talking to his cinematographer going, okay, this is what we're trying to represent. How can we do that? I think it's Kevin Smith going, here's the script, you shoot it.
Yeah. And yeah, it works in Clerks. I don't think it works here. I think this film has got a very different feel. Like you say, it's cartoonier, it's glossier, and that sort of the wide shot thing, it works for a slower film about people talking, which obviously this is a film about people talking, but it's a bit more madcap and teen comedy. I don't know,
yeah, I agree. And David Klein has gone on to have a very fruitful career. He's come back to work with Kevin Smith many times. He does a lot of TV and stuff. Like the guy's moved on. I haven't seen any of his recent stuff. I don't know, like if he's changed particularly. But I don't know. I just don't care about any of that because it's funny.
The one thing, Kevin Smith obviously talks about budget a lot, and for me is that if they manage to make I know we haven't moved on to Chasing Amy yet, but Chasing Amy was made on a lot less money than this. And to compare that to this, I just think, where have they spent that $6 million, is it they got for this?
Well, Stan Lee's not cheap.
Well, I mean, this was before a Stan Lee cameo was cool.
It was before, before he went big.
I tell you what, to say we've been slagging off the acting in these films, he gets the best performance I've ever seen out of Stan Lee.
I mean, it's because he wasn't senile.
Yeah.
He wasn't some old man who were just rolling out to point at stuff.
So, yeah, Jason Mewes has loosened up a bit. I like that.
Yeah, he's a lot more comfortable in what he's doing. Yeah.
My main problem. Okay, and so in this film, there's a whole like little bit where they go off to the other mall, like the flea mall or whatever they call it, like the dirt mall, and they see. That's not really necessary. None of that it really adds anything. It's a okay little scene, but
I think that's
necessary.
I don't know if you've seen any of the deleted scenes or anything on there or read much into it, but that was added, I think, basically to get around the fact that they'd taken out the whole original opening.
Right.
So they had to make quite a few changes. They had to make them leave the mall for a reason, and so that they could then come back with a plan. And that was basically put in. Originally, there was this whole 20-minute opening where the main character accidentally shoots some governor, and this is why Brandy's dad hates him so much, because he lost some funding for a TV program, something like that. But it was all taken out, and they've had to kind of do minor rewrites and minor changes.
The one I watched had him nearly shoot the governor. Is that
where they're up on the? Oh, you've watched the one with the original opening.
Yeah, that's not the film.
The actual opening's just some narration.
When I was younger, I watched this and I was thinking, have I put the right film on? Because I don't remember any of this. And they're not in a mall and what? Yeah, this is really weird. And then pulled up IMDb and checked the character names, and it sort of went okay. So that's not. So what's the ending in the?
That's the beginning. It's the beginning. Is
sorry, not the. So yeah, what's the?
The start is just Jason Lee narrating over images of the mall. You know, when you see rug munchers and all the different shops. It's literally just narrating over the front.
Interesting. I think that's what I saw the first time I watched it, and yeah, that's all right. So I've accidentally watched two different versions of the film.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I watched that original opening as well. I can't really remember; it was a while ago, but yeah, I watched that.
I mean, it's not very good, and it doesn't fit with the film. It was right to take it out, but it does explain why Brandy's dad hates him so much. Because you're not given any of that; you're just told that he hates him, and that's it.
I don't know. I'm all right though with just like a hard ass dad not liking his daughter's boyfriend, especially when the fuck is trying to marry her and they're about 21 years old.
Yeah.
What the fuck? And that's my main problem with this film, because it wraps up with all the relationships being patched up together. But there's nothing within this film that tells us they're anything but terrible relationships that specifically these women should get out of, but the men manage to drag them back in. And just really toxic, bad relationships that should not carry on, but we're supposed to be happy that they've got together at the end. Yeah. And these young kids who get married. And again, this is just Kevin Smith, find a woman, nail her down. Nail that shit down before she leaves you because you're a fat, small dick cocksucker. That's Kevin Smith's inner thoughts.
I wanted her to go off with Dante at the end in the Wild Rip-Off game.
It's not Dante.
Brian O'Halloran.
It's ridiculous.
Struggling to fit that face into a suit. Brear, you like a big face on a woman.
Oh, is this going to be a running theme?
Well, if you were a woman who liked a big face on a man, would you like Dante? Or is that not what you're talking about?
No, that's not what I'm into. You don't get the nuances of the big face, so it's just...
It's not a square face, it's like a circle face. It's a very round face.
No, the bigger face, it's... I'm gonna have to meet up with you at some point and bring some images. But yeah, that whole 15-year-old who's having sex with lots of people to make a book about it.
That's fucking weird. Yeah.
Weird.
Which it is weird. Obviously it plays out that they use that as a way to get the Ben Affleck character off their backs. But But it's a
But
weird
like the
thing.
Jason Lee
Is it
character's
just a
like
different
chatting her
time?
up as well and trying to get involved and get filmed with her.
Her parents
it
know
kind of-
what she's doing. Is a weird.
But I think one of the reasons it gets away with it is that, yeah, she looks 36.
Yeah.
and like doesn't act like a child in any way. But yeah, it's just this weird thing. It was just like, is this just 1995? Is this okay then? I guess it was.
One of the notes I made was that this is the most 90s thing I've ever seen.
Oh,
Like,
that was my first note. I put everything about this is so 1995. Even the font on the credits is like
Yes.
just screams 95.
it's,
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the first of many Kevin Smith films that opens with like comic book art for no reason, isn't it?
yeah, he got like an actual a good artist to draw it. That was again, it was changed.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know about that.
He originally got it changed because it was again the starting had to be changed, so they put this in instead. So it was kind of a last minute thing, but it's basically him just an excuse to get someone to draw him like a comic.
Well, I'm going to take issue with some of what you said, but I'll save it for the next film. I'm assuming it. There's another scene where Kevin Smith's insecure about the number of sexual partners a woman has. Just a running thing.
Yeah.
I think it's undeniably a weaker follow-up film. It is a very watchable, enjoyable film in spite of many, 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 many flaws. So I'd give it a 7, just about.
Well, I find it hilarious despite many, many flaws.
Just rattle off some of the parts you find like really funny.
I mean, big titty
I
mermaids.
was laughing at Jason Mewes a lot.
Yeah.
Jason Lee, really. I think if you take Jason Lee out of this and put in another actor who's just fine but like not that charisma, then I don't think I would get on with this film in the same way.
Have you ever watched Alvin and the Chipmunks 3 Chipwrecked?
No.
I'd be very interested to know what you make of it, because that's got Jason Lee in it as well.
I'm not saying he's the greatest actor ever. I'm saying he was right for this part. And bear in mind, he was a skateboarder. He was a professional skateboarder. He was not an actor.
You're saying Jason Lee isn't right for the role of Dave Seville?
I would never say that. I do enjoy this film despite myself. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10.
I generally find it funny. It plods along nicely, I suppose. Yeah, that's a 7. It's a solid 7 for me. I do enjoy it. It's a good film.
And to say this is the one, or certainly earlier in his career, this was the one that Kevin Smith himself would always put through as, oh yeah, this is the shit one. Because that's what he's all about, owning what other people will insult you for. You know, I think there's a reason this took off on the home video market. There's a reason this captured that stoner market. It has a certain flavour that works on that level. And I don't think it's a bad film at all.
Kevin Smith's one of these people who's always announcing projects, and then very few of them happen. He's like a Guillermo del Toro. He's yeah.
So too often controversial.
So we'll save discussion of Clerks spin-offs, I think, till we've covered Clerks 2. But with Mallrats, I think he wrote a script for it. It was definitely an idea for a while. He was going to try and get... I think it was quite close to when the first one came out. He wanted to make a sequel that was just Mallrats 2, Die Hard in a Mall. And then Paul Blart Mall Cop did the same idea years later. And I think that would have worked quite nicely. The idea of a kind of hostage siege thing, you could see that working. Jay and Silent Bob certainly would fit into that.
Mm-hmm.
More recently, like as in the last 2 or 3 years, he wrote a follow-up TV series. I think it might have been a film initially, and then it was going to be a TV series called Mallrats, and he basically went round assembling the original cast, getting everyone on board. It was officially announced, it was officially going ahead, and then he just turned around and said, no one's giving us any money to make it, I can't get funding, no one's interested, and it's not happening.
That is a crucial aspect of the filmmaking process. Yeah.
And I think because he wanted it to be a TV show, I think, he kind of needed to have a channel on board, or Netflix or someone. And for Netflix to turn down Kevin Smith's TV series, that's quite telling. They'll take a lot of stuff from a lot of people.
After Mallrats kind of didn't do very well at the box office, Miramax hadn't given up on a Kevin Smith. and they wanted to do his next film. But he, having had problems with the studio interference, he wanted to do it really low budget and kind of with his mates again. And so the Miramax company said, "Well, all right, we'll give you like 250 grand, like as a joke, because you can't make a film with that much." And then off that, he made Chasing Amy.
Really? That small an amount? Fucking hell.
Yeah, it was
Wow,
quarter of a million.
yeah. I think the story goes something like they wanted to make it for 6 million with, David Schwimmer in it.
Oh, man. That would have been amazing.
Can you remember, Brear? Can you remember the 3 actors that he mentions?
No, not at all.
Who is it? He mentions 3 specific actors to play the 3 main roles. And David Schwimmer was one of them, I think. Anyway, so he said, "Oh, look, I can do it for much less and with different actors." Well, no, he said, "I want to do it with these actors," and they said, "Well, we're not giving you any money to do that." So he said, "Well, give me 250 grand." No, I think, hang on, the story goes, it says, "I can make it for 200 grand," and one of the Weinsteins it was said, "All right, you can make a film for 200 grand. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 250." And then he went back to Scott Mosier, and Scott Mosier said, "We can't make a film for 250
Jon
grand.
Stewart.
It's stupid." Jon Stewart, yeah, that would be Jon Stewart as the Banky character, I guess.
Yeah.
He sort of goes back to his roots of making a little indie film, much more under his control, I guess, and found a lot more success, and sort of won himself over again in the public eye.
Well, I think it's easy to see why it was far more respected than Mallrats. The subject material being explored just a bit more weighty. I think that's basically what it comes down to. It's not the film has aspirations beyond like dick jokes.
It feels like a proper film with a greatest respect to the other 2 that we've already discussed. It feels like there's an actual running plot where there's like you say, a little bit weightier, a little bit more to it.
We didn't mention in Mallrats there is an appearance by Joey Lauren Adams as a sort of not particularly relevant character that just pops up every now and then. And then she is the female lead in this next film. She was fucking Kevin Smith at the time.
I'm going to say, we all know why.
Was she? I didn't realise that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it might not be connected at all. Now, Joey Lauren Adams, I'm all right with her. She's an all right actor. She should be playing sort of the best friend character, really, shouldn't she, rather than the lead?
Now, knowing what you just said about the budget makes this a hell of a lot more forgivable. One of my big issues that just really wound me up with this film was it opens with the exact same comic book art opening credit sequence from the previous film. And it makes sense here thematically, unlike the previous film, because this is actually about comic books and comic book artists. We're meant to buy that these guys are making a professional comic book and like it's really popular, and the artwork is shit. It is really, really low quality comic book art that like anyone who's actually into comics they wouldn't be taken remotely seriously. There's a very specific, hideous kind of like it's been coloured in on Microsoft Paint, horrible colour palette, just hideous artwork that it's a very specific style, and they use it here, and I've seen it in other things like this, and it's just...
I mean, you say that to anyone who's ever read a comic, but I mean, I'm not a big comic fan, I don't pretend to be, but at the same time, Kevin Smith is much more than probably all of us combined. He owns a comic shop, so if he's forwarding it, I imagine he's seen something similar. Maybe it's just not the comics that you read or that you've read.
I don't think Kevin Smith's a director who's capable of looking at like any level of art design or set design and going,
possibly not.
That's good. That's good. Or do it like this. I think he'll just go, yeah, that's a comic book picture. That looks like a comic.
I do have a feeling though that the guy who drew these is the guy who draws the Bluntman and Chronic comics, which obviously Kevin Smith is, I believe, partially responsible for. So he's certainly involved to a certain extent in choosing it and looking at it.
The plot is basically Holden and Banky make this comic book. They meet this girl who makes a different comic called Alyssa. Holden and Alyssa start getting on. They find out Alyssa's a lesbian, but then Holden and Alyssa end up falling for each other nonetheless. And it causes trauma in all their relationships.
Which it really...
That's the basic plot.
I got really annoyed watching this film, right? Because every single character is such a fucking child. Like, it just...
Yeah.
Just... Who the... Just grow... Like, first of all... Hey, Amy's like... Not Amy, what's she got? Alyssa. Alyssa's like... She's all pissed off, like... Fuck you, how dare... Like, for fuck's sake, don't you know how hard it's going to be to not be a lesbian? And you think, well, okay, that's believable that she might think people are going to think less of her. Then there's a scene where she's, like, coaxed into coming out with her lesbian friends. And they all sort of go, oh.
Yeah, surely
you
your
like
friends
a man.
would be like supportive and like questioning it. Like, oh my god, well, he's straight now. They wouldn't be like, oh, you bitch.
Yeah, even though obviously you would be supportive of your friend and blah, 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 blah. My experience of the gay community is they tend to be quite fluid.
Well,
and,
because they've all come out.
Yeah, but guys, we've got to remember this was 1997. It was a different time in terms of public perception of sexuality and acceptance of it. And so it was a little bit more us and them, because it was like, okay, this is our community and we feel safe here. and things weren't as fluid back then. And I think the character of Banky here, played by Jason Lee, represents the kind of the ignorant view. He doesn't know anything about that world, and he's kind of fascinated by it, and he kind of treats it with disrespect, but not intentionally. And then you've got Holden, who's really trying to understand it and respect it, and then kind of misunderstanding it, but in another way. And then you've got Alyssa, who's part of that world, and is therefore kind of confused by it because she's trying to step away from it or whatever, or she's trying to straddle the two worlds and doesn't feel comfortable doing so. And I do think that is representative of the fact that this was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And just the way that those different cultures were accepted was different.
Yeah. I mean, like I say,
and I think some of the things that Banky says in this film, you just would not have a character saying.
Oh God, no!
In a film today, even though
it makes
ultimately
him hideously unlikable to the point.
And I think completely differently now than if you watched it in '97. And I think, and I think it's actually handled quite well, because ultimately he learns. Ultimately, we understand where he's coming from, and that there's not a great deal of malice there. The malice that is there is not about sexuality; it's just about him losing his friend and all this.
Yeah.
And I think it's a well-rounded character in that sense.
I did write a note.
I just don't think you would get away with it.
Well, I think it is until it turns out, oh, he's gay, and that's why he behaves this way. And it's funny when Ben Affleck accuses him of being gay, and that's like his overly simplistic read on the character, and that's the joke. But then subsequent films confirm, oh no, he was gay, and it's just a bit like, oh, really?
But I think again, this is where, like I said, Kevin Smith doesn't quite give you any answers. He just sort of throws these questions at you. And my biggest dislike in this film was the character of Holden McNeil, played by Ben Affleck, because that character is just a total dick, and for some of the reasons you've just said.
I think everyone in this film's a dick. I think all of them are so... It's like high school drama, the romance.
No, I agree.
And it's this constant... And what you were saying before about Kevin Smith being very good at presenting different sides of an argument, I think that's true, because every time a character opened their mouth in this film, I was like, oh, fuck off, you are fuck right, shut up. That's the most annoying argument way of looking at it. But then another character would come out and manage to make me feel the exact same way with like an opinion on the other side of the spectrum, and it was just quite fascinating how he managed it.
But this is why I was kind of irritated by that, and I was getting a bit wound up by the film in general. But the ending won me over, because what happens to Holden McNeil is that
ultimately
he makes these bad decisions and loses two relationships. He loses his best friend of many years and the first woman he's ever loved, and he loses them both because of his childish and immature behaviour. But we also get a sense that he's learned from that, and that he'll move forward and be a bit of a better person, but a more rounded person. I loved that ending. I loved that it wasn't a happy ending, as in, oh, and then he won the girl over and his friend was fine.
Yeah.
It was a realistic ending in the sense that we make bad decisions, we do say stupid things, we do fuck up relationships, but hopefully we learn from it.
Yeah, no, I agree. My read is basically it's three incredibly toxic people, and I think the reason I find it kind of maybe a bit difficult to get on board with the film is because it's just they're so unlikable. And I don't think the film presents them as I think the film presents them as people I should like and should be rooting for, and I don't. I hate them. I think they are awful. I just want them to fucking grow up. But you're right, they do grow up at the end, and the film does come down on them not being, it doesn't present them as people to aspire to or emulate.
Yeah.
So I think it works, but I just don't like them. I find it difficult to root for them on any level.
Yeah.
And also they make there are several points where they make incredibly unbelievable character decisions that seem to come out of nowhere, particularly towards the end. But
the whole sit down with the three of them.
Yeah.
It doesn't. But again, I didn't like that. But I like the fact that it just fell on its arse, and they were like, "This is stupid. What are you talking about?"
Well, it
kind of
plays
worked
like
on
a
that
big
level.
gag, and I think it kind of is. But then it's just so out of character with everything we've seen from him up until that point that you just can't buy any of it. It just I don't know. It doesn't work. I don't think.
The whole one of my complaints with the film is that the tone in general just feels quite jarring. You've touched on it, with some of the arguments, like when they're screaming at each other in the street and things like that. And sometimes when the questions about sexuality are being asked, it's clearly a joke, and then other times you're told that, oh, this is bad. He shouldn't be asking questions like this. He's a bad person for doing it. And it's like, should we be laughing at it, or should we be judging him for it? And you've both already said, it feels you're never quite sure which side you're supposed to be on, or any side, and it just feels weird to. I'm never sure if I'm meant to be angry with them, laughing at them.
I think that's
or on their side.
It's hard to know where you're meant to stand with a lot of it, and if it wasn't a Kevin Smith film, I'd think that was by design, but I just don't. I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt, I suppose. But for example, it's things like at one point he finds out that he's been led to believe that he's the first man she's ever been with, and he's turned her straight and she's a lesbian. And then one of the big revelations in the film is, oh no, she's been with men before. She's been with lots of people, and men make up some of that. And she gets furious when he confronts her about it, because it all seems to stem from him being insecure about the number of sexual partners she's had, a running theme with Kevin Smith. And it's like, no, that's a fucking massive red flag, and it should, he's well within his rights to be pissed off, because she's lied to him very significantly about something quite big to them. It's not that she's had multiple sexual partners or whatever. It's that she's been lying about this thing, and why is she keeping that a secret? But then the character never even acknowledges the fact that the lie is an issue. It's just
she does.
No, he doesn't. He always just goes on about the thought of you sucking dicks, or fucking hell, Kevin Smith, get over it.
At the same time, though, and I don't know how old these characters are supposed to be, and we've all said that we think Kevin Smith probably hasn't grown as much with his insecurities as he should do, but it was certainly an issue when, amongst all of my friends, as far as I remember, to a certain extent, when we were younger. I don't know how old they're supposed to be, but it does feel like they should be older than, you've slept with too many people at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're older than 19, that shouldn't really be a problem.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that scene particularly where they have a conflict and they go out in the street and they're shouting at each other. It's not a well-directed scene because Joe Lauren Adams is up at the top straight away and stays there all the time.
Yeah, no,
it needs more levels. I don't want to blame her because I think that's the director's responsibility. But I like that scene because she's really pissed off at the way that he's confronted her about it.
Yeah.
He's pissed off because he's found out this truth. But then she apologizes to him. She kind of tries to make up for him, and he pushes her away. I like that. I like this kind of messing up of who's to blame, and this feels real. This is what relationships are about, because it's not like, oh, you did a bad thing and I blame you for that. It is like this mess. Yeah, you did this, I did that, but I still love you, and this does that. I really like that, and I think it plays well.
Yeah, and there's a lack of clean communication. Really, I mean, that's kind of, I agree. It does. It captures that very well. I just kind of struggle to gather how much of it's intentional. I think a lot of it's here by accident, frankly.
I don't know how many times can he do it by accident, though. I think he's proved himself time and time again that he can write that kind of thing.
I don't think he has. I think that this is the only film that really has that sort of level of nuance that effectively.
But he still wrote it, whether he meant it or not. It's still there, because even if he didn't consciously do it, he presented something that he felt was true, based on his experiences, I imagine. And the one thing that you do get from Kevin Smith is honesty. Like, he's open. He's really an open book.
Yeah.
And he puts that into his fiction as well.
Well, again, I think the cinematography is kind of shit in this film. I think it's a step up from Mallrats.
Yeah, it's flat. It's very flat, yeah. But again, they have these long shots. Well, Mallrats is just a lot more active and dynamic, because there's loads of colours and people running around and things.
There's a lot of nice colours in this film, honestly. There's one of the things I'll say about the cinematography is that it does make quite a nice use of the colour palette it's got to work with. It does have a lot of, like, blues and reds at night time, and it is quite colourful in a way that didn't have to be.
Yeah, but I do think the editing just isn't very sharp.
Yeah.
Bear in mind, this film was edited by Kevin Smith and Scott Mosier. This is the first time they'd edited their stuff. Now, Kevin Smith edits all his own stuff these days and really swears by it. It's like it's another. He says that's another way of writing a film. You know, you write it, you direct it, and then you edit it. It's like a 3-part creation. And I agree with that. I believe editing is incredibly important. But this was the first time they'd done it, and I just don't think it's very... It's not bad, it's just not sharp.
Yeah.
It just needs to be kicked up a little bit. So that's probably budgetary reasons. They just couldn't afford an editor.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah.
I like this concept. A lesbian having to kind of come out as bisexual to her lesbian community. Or a gay person basically having to kind of... That kind of coming out story from the other side, if you know what I mean. That's an interesting concept. It's kind of dealt with in 2 scenes here, and and it's kind of just dismissed. But I think that's an interesting story that could be written. I don't know if Kevin Smith could write it. I don't, and that's the other part of this.
That's one of the big flaws with this film is it feels like it needed to be written by a lesbian woman or someone within the gay community who had that knowledge, because it just, harking back to what we were saying at the start with that scene feeling very inauthentic, where she comes out to her friends and it accidentally, and you saying, well, it's a product of being made 20 years ago, and it's a product of someone who isn't part of that community writing what I think is quite an inauthentic take on that community 20 years ago. It just...
What thoughts on Jay and Silent Bob in this one? We've not touched on them.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they pop up for one scene, and the problem with this is Kevin Smith's written a film in which the central character is essentially representing something he's gone through. You know, that's fair enough. He's writing what he knows. Why would you then write a scene where you come in yourself and tell a story that exactly explains the story you're telling? I mean, in a 40-second monologue. Why not just do that monologue and go, oh, here's a story about when I was feeling, insecure about a girl. You've already written a film about this. You don't need to then encapsulate it in 30 seconds again. It's just not necessary.
They feel really shoehorned into this.
Yeah.
I mean, they were comic relief in the other films. They had a certain amount of role and appeal. And in this, it's just Jay swearing for a few minutes and then a monologue, and then they've gone. Like you said, it could have been anyone else doing that. That could have been done in some other way, another scene somewhere else. They're not required in this film. There's no reason for it at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all right.
Kevin Smith's starting to get a bit bigger, isn't he? I mean, I think it's a sort of little low budget thing. It's very watchable. There's definitely some nice elements and some nice moments to it. I'd give this a 7 as well. I think that's a higher 7 than Mallrats, but still a 7.
Yeah, same. I explained how I feel. I gave it an 8. I do enjoy the film still. And I think I just really like Kevin Smith's writing. Actually, I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
I feel like I've probably been more negative speaking about this than I actually am. It's I like the film, and although it makes me angry, it's because I can't figure out who I'm supposed to be siding for, and I quite like that it's asking those questions of me when I look back at it. Yeah, it's an 8 for me as well. It's a good film. I enjoy it.
Cool. After Chasing Amy, really won Kevin Smith over with the critics again. So it proved he could write something a little bit more mature. He went off in a completely different direction. And made Dogma. By far the biggest film he'd made to date, in terms of budget and scale generally, just in terms of mass release. It's quite different from his previous films in that it takes a much bigger topic. But again, it came from his own personal views. It came from his own crisis of faith and his own kind of look at religion and all that sort of thing.
Is it right that he wrote this before anything else? Wasn't this his first, or certainly prior to Clerks, that he wrote this?
I don't know, actually.
I believe that's the case, or at least he started, wrote a draft of it. I imagine it's very different to what.
But this film really, I think it really sums up Kevin Smith a lot. Kevin Smith's the sort of person, he is smart enough to realise that, organised religion is just total bullshit, but he's also insecure enough to need faith, to need a belief in something bigger than himself, because otherwise it's his responsibility and he can't take
that pretty much echoes my sentiment on this film, which is essentially that it's a good idea completely let down by the fact it was clearly made by someone who believes in God.
Well, I think I mean, as speaking as an atheist, I'm all down with hating religion, but I think again it's a very measured view.
Yeah, it keeps pulling its punches at the moments where there's so many moments where it's like, right, what you've just described is like a horrible, horrible character, and then we're supposed to be like, oh my God, God's just turned up. All the complaints we had are forgiven from earlier. I love you, God. Oh God, I'm going to bow down to you, God. I love you so much, Alanis Morissette. And
that's what forgiveness is. That's what religion is all about.
Exactly.
Forgiveness.
And this is a critique of that written by someone who believes in it. So it just comes across as like
it's someone who believes in God and believes in a faith and doesn't necessarily agree with religion and the way that it's set up. Doesn't in the dogma. Yeah, exactly. So I don't think there's necessarily an issue from his point of view of people worshipping God, certainly from his point of view. And I don't feel that it...
I agree. There's a few points where... I mean, for example, our main character, she early on basically says... Alan Rickman shows up and says, God's real. Do you want to help out? Save the day for God? And she's like, no, God's a bellend. Look at all this shit that he does. What an awful person. Later on, she meets God, and in no way has any of what she said earlier been countered or even mentioned again, really. And suddenly she's totally on board with God, and you're just meant to think, oh, God's great. God's not dead, guys. God's not dead.
I'm an atheist as well, and I agree with the way I feel about religion is similar to yourself. However, from her point of view, her big issue with God was that the ability to have a child was taken away from her, and then her husband, who was obviously a dick, left her because of that, so she's probably better off without him anyway. And yeah, it's just all right, you're pregnant now, that's fixed, and maybe that's not the best way to deal with it, but from her point of view I could see that she's, oh, God is real, they're right in front of me, they've saved the day, and they've fixed the one issue I really had with them. I could see why they would be kind of come around to it. And also, by the way, Jesus Christ was your great whatever, so you're actually related. If you were put in that real life position, you wouldn't go, oh yeah, you're a bellend.
I don't know, I might.
You probably would.
Specifically given the circumstances where everything's been kicked off, so this film is definitely different to his previous films.
Yeah, and in a very jarring way, because we haven't mentioned properly, but these films are all set within the same cinematic universe, to use a modern terminology. The viewer universe.
Well, they are.
But this is very tonally different to everything he's made before, and so.
I mean, you're a proponent also for tone within the same universe being allowed to be different. You've said, we could do a comedy, we could do a horror, we could. That's all in the same cinematic universe.
I don't
so
have
no
an issue with that. I just think it's kind of strange. What I do have an issue with is them when they try and come back to Jay and Silent Bob being like normal people, act as if they've never seen God in the next film. It becomes a bit more awkward, but
we're going to talk about the next film. There's plenty of issues with that one.
Well, I think this film is very I always see the View Askew universe thing as more of a kind of like nice little Easter egg, nice little thing for the fans. I don't think it's really relevant to much. One perhaps exception to that is Jay and Silent Bob turning up in this film, because they're so connected with the other films, obviously, the characters that are already established. And I think he does actually a very good job of making them fit in this film and making their characters relevant. I actually really like that.
I mean, I'm going to put out there, it's probably quite clear anyway from the discussions with it, I'm going to defend this film quite heavily, probably from any criticism. Even if I agree with it. Watching this film again made me realise just how much I like this film. And maybe it's just remembering my original watchings of it or whatever, but I think this stands up really well. There are issues with it, obviously. But yeah, I really like this film, and I think they work much better in this universe than they do in this film than they do in a lot of the others. They work quite well with it. They bring the right level of humour to what is otherwise a relatively serious subject, I suppose, or could be.
How do you feel about Jay and Silent Bob in this film?
I think they are the funniest they've ever been. They really click here. This is them being put to good use. They know what they're doing for once. Yeah, great. I'd like to see more of them in supporting roles in sort of genre.
So you want to see more of them? Well, just you
in like genre pictures. I like the idea
like
of
horror.
Stick them in a haunted house or
Scream 3.
They work really well here. Like this could be like Bill and Ted 3. You could just swap them out.
Yeah.
No, I really like them here, and I found them legitimately quite funny in a more intelligent way than they've ever been funny before. Like, it wasn't just relying on snoogens or whatever shit he says and, and going on about like sucking clits and stuff. It was
Snoochie.
He does do a fair
He does a bit of that,
well.
but then he also, says he's driving the car and then breaks it by not knowing what a gear is and stuff like that, which is just a bit more, it's like a different level of humour that it's suddenly working on, which I think's, nice.
The plot, basically, is our lead of Linda Fiorentino. She's a Catholic, but she works in an abortion clinic. So straight away, you're setting up this sort of dichotomy character. But again, that is kind of just there to be deliberately antagonistic to set up the character, because the fact that she works in an abortion clinic is never really relevant, other than she's like a bad Catholic, you know what I mean? And she's a lapsed Catholic. And she's called off on by the Metatron, played by Alan Rickman, the voice of God, to essentially go on a holy pilgrimage to save the world, because two angels are going to kind of accidentally destroy
and
all existence.
What a find they had in Matt Damon, eh? It's a shame.
Do I get a hint of sarcasm?
Well, you've got brilliant, lead actor material. Matt Damon. He's a good actor. I like Matt Damon. Shame he couldn't bring any of that talent to the table in this particular film, isn't it?
Well, I think this is one of those examples of where Kevin Smith making films with his friends and having a good laugh doesn't get the best out of people.
Yeah, for me, Matt Damon just seems to be enjoying himself, whether he's acting well or not. Doesn't seem to care. He just seems to be having a lot of fun with it, and you can see that he's enjoying himself, whether or not he's good or not is different.
I think he and Ben Affleck are awful in this film. I think Ben Affleck is particularly awful in this film. To say my sort of concept of Ben Affleck's largely been shaped by watching things like Argo. It was just astonishing. He's awful in this film, and
But I don't think Ben Affleck is a good actor particularly. I think he gets away with it and he does a fine job.
Just
but...
right away, like, why would you not cast them the other way round? That'd fix it. That'd make it work, like, so much better. It might not be great, but they're just not the right way round, those two parts. Ben Affleck, I think, could play that real maniacal dickhead because he does it in Mallrats.
I think I agree with you to a certain extent. I think the issue with that is at the end, when it flips, I don't think I could see Ben Affleck go from that maniacal dickhead to the drunken human who's sorry about it now. I don't think that would work. But overall, throughout the film, yeah, you're probably right.
And similarly, I think Matt Damon's too inherently likeable to work in the role he's given here. And
that was supposed to be Jason Lee.
That would have been so much better.
Yeah, originally it was meant to be Ben Affleck and Jason Lee again, but Jason Lee had some filming commitment, which meant he couldn't give the time to it, which was why he took Azrael in the end.
You know that cheating couple on the bus, like when the guy gets shot? Is that the same couple that are getting off on the hood of the car in Chasing Amy?
Scott Mosier is the same, isn't it?
Scott Mosier,
man.
It is the same woman as well, actually.
Oh, right.
That was a nice little bit of continuity. I thought that was quite nice.
But she's like the production manager on the film, you know what I mean? She wasn't like an actor. They just said, "Oh, can you play this extra role?"
Yeah, but I assume they're meant to be the same
But
characters as well. Then that's quite a nice little detail. If you're going to do this sort of intertwining universe connectivity thing, I'd much rather we get stuff like that than, oh, my friend fucked a dead guy in a toilet in that town once.
Yeah, it's a bit too on the nose. Yeah, two angels are played by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. They've been sort of banned from heaven, and now they've find this way to get back in. But in doing so, will undo
end existence.
Brilliant concept, like really fantastic concept there for a story, I think.
Well, what I do like about this is how much sort of Christian iconography, Christian ideas, and like stories and stuff that it brings in, and like the angels and all this sort of stuff, without being alienating, because I don't know that much about all this details. It's explained just enough to pull you in.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's very. I don't think it's particularly accurate a lot of the time. You know, you've got Chris Rock complaining that all the white apostles are remembered and the black ones were forgotten, when of course they were all fucking Middle Eastern. But
yeah,
I mean, one of the angels is called Loki, which isn't even a Catholic or Christian.
That as well.
You know, it's Norse mythology. It's not even the right kind of god or anything like that. So it's not particularly.
But it does play for the most part. Now, just to go back to the two angels there, you've got Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, who I've complained about and I think are shocking in this film. But them aside, the acting is suddenly a hell of a lot better than anything in any Kevin Smith film to date. Now, is that the result of just hiring good actors, or has Kevin Smith improved as a director?
I'll tell you what has improved. The size of the budget. That's why you can afford someone like Alan Rickman.
Well, Alan Rickman was a big Chasing Amy fan.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Ben Affleck and Matt Damon obviously come in on the cheap. They're friends of Kevin Smith. They're hot off of Good Will Hunting, which means they bring in a budget. The producers, well, the studio will go, "Oh, you've got Matt Damon and Ben Affleck in it. We can sell that. Here's $20 million."
Their performance would suggest to me that Kevin Smith hasn't got any better at directing actors, and it's just that he's able to hire good actors. Jason Lee is good in this. He's like he was in the previous film, more confident, seems to know what he's doing now. Alan Rickman is Alan Rickman. He's not his best work.
Actually, I think I think he plays it quite kind of. He plays it with a certain level of camp that works. But again, it feels like an actor with no direction. It just feels like he's sort of made this decision, I'm going to play it really deadpan.
Chris Rock is ever dependable. I think this is a good role for him. Yeah.
Again, Chris Rock's never been an amazing actor, but he's got that great charm and just such a power of personality, force of personality.
He's just likeable regardless, isn't he?
Can do it, yeah.
George Carlin has an extended cameo that people seem to think's better than it is. It's fine. Yeah.
It's nice. That's a nice concept, though. The Catholic Church trying to bring in the youth. I do like that. You've got these kind of not dead ends, but things that don't quite play out. There's the rubber poop monster.
Yeah, never quite.
It's just for that scene. It never goes anywhere.
Well, that when that appears, it feels like they're setting up a big concept that is going to play into the film significantly, or at least like a villain that's going to be pursuing them for the rest of the film. And like you say, it's one scene. It's just set up for a gag with some deodorant or like air freshener. It's weird.
Yeah.
And then the same with Azrael, who's dispatched sort of just very simply, in quite a nice way. I like what they did, but it just seemed a bit too easy that the main villain is just like, poof, he's gone now. And that's because, we have to get rid of who is essentially the big bad guy, the guy behind it all, so that we can concentrate on this redemptive story. And I like that the fact that our villains are redeemed, and that we are on their side in some way as well. But then in that case, don't have the big bad guy that is just evil and we have to get him. You know, if you're going to do that ambiguous story.
Just have them figure it out on their own.
Little elements like that, which, like I'm saying, again, like we have been on the others, I think I'm picking out the negative things because I like the film. So little elements of that in the script that don't quite work, but again, the way he writes is great. He gets away with a lot because of it.
Do you want to know right? So there's three things that really wind me up in this film. Do you reckon you can guess any of them?
Ooh. That God just fixes everything at the end, and
I guess so. That's not one of the ones that. No, actually, no, I'm fine with that. Well, no, I'm not. That's not one of the ones I was going to list.
Full of things.
It's going to be something really weird and obscure.
Yeah.
Anyway. Some sort of.
Two of them are. One of them is.
Go on.
Well, I hate those fucking demon hockey players because Kevin Smith clearly thinks that's the coolest idea he's ever seen. He thinks, fucking hell, hockey and hockey demons. This film is gonna be the fucking shit, man. And I know
what one of the others is now.
So fucking lame. I hate them. They are so shit.
They're not. Yeah, I know what you mean. As henchmen, they've got a gimmick. It's all right, isn't it?
But what relevance is there for like hockey to Christianity? There's no line to be drawn unless I missed a line of dialogue that explains it. I don't.
No, it's just a gimmick for them.
It's just Kevin Smith went, I like hockey.
Yeah.
You could have at least written a line of dialogue like, they manifest in a,
they were a hockey team.
Way
that
fits.
In the car accident.
Yeah, anything.
No, they're
just. It's just self-indulgence that I don't like.
Yeah. So on that level, your other complaint is God loves skee ball.
It's
It's not that, because it's exactly the same problem. It's just like they have it in Chasing Amy. They go and do it because obviously Kevin Smith thinks that's the height of entertainment.
No, my other complaint is the obscure one that you're going to complain about. When they go into Mubi's head office and shoot up the place.
Yes.
And Mubi, what is Mubi's like a kind of Walt Disney analogy as well as a McDonald's thing? It seems to be both.
Yeah, the theme
supposed
parks
to be,
and the music and
consuming
the films,
thing.
yeah.
So in the background, you've got all these bits of art that are like all the other Mubi's characters, like, Roofy and Ronald Ruck and all these kind of... And they're presumably drawn by whoever did the comic book art in the previous two films because they are fucking shit. And it's like as if a multi-million-dollar empire could be built on those hideous shit character designs rendered in such horrible way. And it's like there's no excuse to have such shit set design, production design in a film with a budget like this. Because this film obviously does have some money behind it. It's just bad direction. It's shit. And it's emblematic of a lot of this film's direction, honestly. That's the one that sticks out to me. I'm assuming it's the same. I'm assuming he's mates with a graphic designer or an artist who draws all this shit and can't get any work elsewhere because they're shit. And the third one is, you're not meant to be on Ben Affleck's side, but he's clearly correct.
In what is he correct?
In that God is awful and like he should probably just destroy all of existence if God's going to be such.
Oh, you mean when he turns and goes?
I'm going to
back?
say, like, yeah, that's like right at the end when he's turned, as opposed to throughout.
But like Ben Affleck basically goes off on a big speech about how God turned her back on like these people and it's not fair and it's wrong and blah 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, everything he says is completely 100% true within the context of this film. But he's painted as a villain for it. And yeah, he doesn't have to kill those people, but like...
But what are you going to do if you're God and people are trying to bring you down, you know? You got to defend.
Yeah, I mean, his only punishment, really, is being sent to Earth, and he's talking about how much the humans are revered over the angels, but all he's doing is, you know, the life that he hates is one of a human, but with wings. So, you know...
But we were given free will, and he wasn't. We were given the ability to not crave God's love in the same way, and he's been made by God in this way that causes him existential and like eternal suffering, and it's God's fault that he has those feelings and suffer. I mean, you could argue he brought it on himself as well, but people need to be given the right to grow and change and
You're adding your own sort of belief to it, though. I mean, we don't really know that he has that existential suffering. He
literally says it. He said
it. Also, literally says that they can become human by cutting their wings off. So does that mean that?
Yeah, well, that
point
annoyed
he
me.
loses that existential.
Yeah, no, I had the same question.
So yeah, if he just becomes human, then surely stop pissing him off.
No, I know. Well, when I found out they could just become human, I was like, hang on, why didn't they just do that at the start?
Yeah, that is it.
But yeah.
So I mean, what you're dealing with here, Saul, which you mentioned yourself, is that this is written by a man who's questioned his faith and really thought about it, and still come out on the side of faith. And anyone who actually really thinks about it and still works it out that that's a good idea and something you should follow, you know, it's a certain type of person who would do that. So, you know, it's one thing to blindly have faith, but to see and still go along with it, that's another thing. And that's what Kevin Smith is, you know. Well, that's it, because you're coming at it from a point of view of like, well, I've analysed this and obviously this is nonsense. If you're gonna actually try and apply logic to it, then this doesn't work. But you know, that's not what I think. And my problem with that is not that Kevin Smith's written that. I think that's fine, and this is his thing. My problem with it, whenever Kevin Smith talks about it, he's like, "Oh, don't take it so seriously. It's a film with a rubber poop monster."
Yeah,
it's like, well, you know, if you're gonna explore these ideas, then
yeah,
you've done it. You can't then just go, "Oh, it doesn't mean anything."
Yeah.
You're obviously expressing yourself. You're expressing your ideas about religion. Stand by it. That's fine. We haven't really spoken about Linda Fiorentino. There was a period of about 3 or 4 years where she was a thing.
What else?
And then she disappeared again. Men in Black.
Oh, it's her. Okay.
She was in a little indie film called The Last Seduction, which was kind of a bit of an indie success.
I've seen that. Yeah, that sort of neo-noir thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that kind of got her into the mainstream for a couple of years, did these 2 films basically, and then disappeared again. I don't know really what happened to her.
She got pregnant, didn't she? The new Christ.
She had the Christ born. Yeah, she's a perfectly fine actor, but again, I might have to blame the director for this. She plays this thing like she's stoned, like she's on tranquilizers or something.
I've only seen her in this and Men in Black, I think, and then an interview with her. And from my experience of her, that's just sort of how she is all the time. She looked a bit out of it in the interview as well.
She might have been
Men in
just
Black, she's very...
She might be just off of fucking tits on drugs. It's not impossible, is it?
Oh, no.
Maybe that's why her career just stopped.
Well, Kevin Smith said... Well, I know Kevin Smith's word isn't necessarily anything to go on, but he said that she was very difficult to work with.
Oh, really?
And he wished he'd given the role to someone else, whether that's she's a professional actress. Again, you know, who knows? But he said she was very difficult to work with.
That could be the performance of someone who's just trying to get through it.
Yeah.
So, Alan,
mm-hmm.
I know you don't like the film Home Alone.
Yeah?
Is that because Kevin Smith told you that you shouldn't like it?
No, in fact, Kevin Smith loves John Hughes. I don't know. I find it interesting that he took a pop at Home Alone, and maybe he doesn't like it, and that's like the one John Hughes film he doesn't like.
So, another sort of broad thesis about this film. and why I think it maybe doesn't work as well as it ought to. Kevin Smith, he's got the comedy thing down in this film. He's got the hang of making a sort of funny, amusing film, more or less. He's not a good enough director to do any of the other stuff this film requires. For instance, make Matt Damon seem cool and menacing, like when he shoots up that bus. That scene doesn't work at all. Give it a sense of scope. Give it a sense of like big menace or peril at the end. It completely, the cinematography is shit again. It's completely flat in the exact same way too close in.
That's interesting. It's different DOP on this one.
Well, it's shit in this one, and it's not wide enough shots now. Now you never pull back far enough to get a sense of, like I say, scope. It's just very flat. It's just the most bland way of shooting a film. It's just point a camera. It's done competently, but
they insist on having a different DOP for this bigger scale film. They say that we're going to give you a budget. We want a proper DOP. The DOP is Robert D. Yeoman, who basically does all Wes Anderson's films.
Because there are a few shots where, like, with a different choice of lens, it might have looked quite nice. There's one where when they're fighting each other on the train carriage, and then it's shot from like through the window from outside, and it, like I say, with a different lens, that could have looked nice, but there's no depth to it at all. It feels so flat and lifeless, and most of the film feels like that, and it feels very claustrophobic. I don't know if that's a budgetary thing, like the set wasn't big enough to, like at the end when Ben Affleck's flying around causing havoc, it just feels so small and intimate in a way that I don't think's intentional. It's just, I just don't think Kevin Smith's a good enough director to pull this script off properly, basically. And I put it this way: Little Nicky has a better sense of scope and like peril and story than this film. But on the plus side, the idea of Jesus having a relative on Earth, really fucking great concept again. Really fantastic way the plot develops. Love it. So, there's some good concepts.
Anyway, how did you feel? What was your rating?
Yeah, it's alright. I give it a 7.
Yeah, I mean, a similar sort of thing, really. Yeah, it's like, I think it's all right, but I'm going 8 because again, I like his writing, and it always just pulls me through. So despite the flaws that we've mentioned, I'm happy to give it an 8.
I do think this might be his weakest film to date, though, I've got to say. And
this has been a 10 out of 10 for me at times in my life, and it's come down slowly over the years.
I mean, this is a film that I still really, really love, and again, I can appreciate the faults in it. And yeah, it's an 8 film, but I enjoy it like it's better than that. But yeah, it's an 8.
Let's move on. Let's move swiftly on to the last one.
Now the culmination of the Viewersk universe, the Avengers of the Viewersk universe, if you will, the big crossover event no one asked for.
Well, I mean, maybe you might know more about this, but my memory is that the story goes, Kevin Smith told Jason Mewes if he got off the smack, he'd put him in a film again, and this was the result. Because Jason Mewes,
no, I don't think that. I think there was a story going around at the time of something along those lines, but I think this is the film where he was basically on smack throughout it, and after this film, he said, I'm never using you again unless you get clean. I'm not your friend. We'll never speak again unless you get clean. And it was the experience on this film that led him to that decision.
Well, that's interesting because it's the best performance Jason Mewes has ever given.
So yeah, just in case anybody doesn't know, Jason Mewes, was a heroin addict for a long time and pretty much a fucking no-hoper, like druggie. Probably only alive because Kevin Smith helped him out financially specifically, but also, giving a sort of purpose. And I've got a bit of a COD psychology theory that the reason Kevin Smith keeps Jason Mewes around and likes him so much is because he's one of the few people in his life that makes him feel good about himself. Like, I'm better than you. Yeah. Because we've mentioned that Kevin Smith is so insecure about himself. I think a complete fuck up like Jason Mewes is one of the few people who makes him feel better. And there's a certain condescension and patronizingness to their relationship. Jason Mewes gets put down by Kevin Smith puts down Jason Mewes more than he puts down anyone else. He'll have a joke with other people, but he's too busy putting himself down. Whereas he will slag off Jason Mewes and like take the piss out of him.
Even within the film, like some of the rare times Silent Bob speaks, a lot of them are given to him just calling Jay a stupid fucking idiot and like losing his losing his shit at him. And to be fair to Jay, why doesn't he just fucking talk?
Oh yeah, on that scene on the bridge at Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back when he's doing it, I'm like, yeah, I'm totally on his side. We know you can speak, just fucking tell him. You know he's an idiot, just explain it to him.
Well, and he's trying to mime a sign by doing a it's not even like an obvious mime that he's doing. Anyway, yeah.
You could argue in previous films that he just didn't have anything to say. He didn't need his words. But
in this
for that one particular, it's like you need to communicate something. Just communicate it.
Yeah.
The story it's kind of a continuation of what was set up in Chasing Amy, in that there's a comic book based on Jay and Silent Bob, which is, I mean, something of a MacGuffin in Chasing Amy, but in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, there is a Hollywood film being made of that comic book, and so Jay and Silent Bob want to stop it from happening.
Hot on the heels of X-Men, like way before superhero movies were a proven entity.
But again, Kevin Smith can't just stick to one plot, so he has this whole diamond heist thing that they get involved in.
There's a chimp in there.
Chimp.
Will Ferrell.
It's an orangutan, I believe, actually, but okay.
Oh, it is an orangutan. You're right. Yeah.
Racist. And then the most heinous shoehorn crowbarred cameos and fan service and callbacks to films that lots of people haven't seen.
Yeah.
It's a real... I mean, I can't believe it was made, frankly. I mean, I understand why Kevin Smith would want to make it. I understand why fans would enjoy it, but I can't believe that someone signed it off.
Did Kevin Smith want to make it? Because there's about 15 times, I think, without exaggerating, where characters basically say, like, boy oh boy, wouldn't a film exactly like the one you guys at home are watching be really shit? And then look to camera.
So many breakings of the fourth wall. Just,
That is classic Kevin Smith self-deprecation. Call it out before they do. Slag yourself off before they do. Hey, I'm fat, I've got a small cock, I suck cock.
But he's obviously really insecure about this film, so he's obviously got...
Actually, yeah, to be fair, he doesn't usually do that in the films. I made that point earlier, didn't he? He has faith in his ability as a writer, so...
perhaps this feels uncharacteristically like he's not... Like he's contractually obligated to make it, basically. Yeah. That's what this feels like.
Yeah, I know this is shit, but I'm doing it for me and my mates, so and you've all paid to watch it, so enjoy. So, yeah, I think my feelings are coming out on this.
At the start, you do have all these... It's like a victory lap, just going to all the characters from the previous films. So you've just got all these people reprising these roles from seeing where they're, Dante's there, and Randall.
Back at the quick stop.
That's all right, because it's part of setting up Jay and Silent Bob.
That one works. Then you got Ben Affleck from Chasing Amy, and they go to visit like Jason Lee, and it's just very.
You've got both Jason Lee characters from two different films.
If you haven't seen those films,
exactly,
it's Jason Lee again. Oh, it's Ben Affleck playing a character. Wait, he's playing himself now. What's going on? But it's himself that kills hookers.
It's and none of that's handled very well at all past the quick stop bit. And even the quick stop bit, like I said earlier, why are they treating it like it's the same day as Clerks when it's like 7 years later?
The fucking shutters are closed.
Not only are they closed, but the exact same shoe polish sign assuring us that they're open is still there.
Survived all these years.
Yeah. Again, Ben Affleck is awful throughout this film. It's a running theme. There is so much passive homophobia in this one. It just starts to grate after a while. And again, I know, like, contextually, I would usually take the side of if that character would say it and it fits within the context, blah, 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 then, like, that's fine. It's not condoning it. But there is so much of it in this film. It's just a bit... But I guess that's what you get for making a film with Jay and Silent Bob as the protagonists.
Yeah.
Or Jay, to be honest, as the protagonist.
Yeah.
This really is just a weak assemblage of a load of comedy sketches. But honestly, I think to me this is probably the funniest film so far that he's done. I think like throw any pretense of making it into like a coherent story out the window. It's got a maybe 60% hit ratio for what works, but then like there's some actually really funny stuff in it. Chris Rock in this is the funniest thing in a Kevin Smith film.
I did write a note actually saying Chris Rock completely steals this entire film.
Yeah.
Like towards the end, I was ready for it to be finished, and then obviously Chris Rock turns up and just instantly brilliant. He's just.
Do you think Kevin Smith wrote any of that?
No, I don't think I would. That's just Chris Rock being told go mental,
which is good. That's what you're gonna. That's what you want to do. But that's what works with Chris Rock in a cameo. That's great. And it's just long enough. I imagine the guy bringing him a coffee, that was the written bit, and then they just sort of let him fly off the handle with it.
As cheap as it is, like the cameos do just keep it interesting. That is a cheap way to keep a film interesting, but it does. You have, George Carlin pops up again. It's not even funny, but he's there. Tracy Morgan, one of my favourites. Young Tracy Morgan.
Before he was really
before he was really known.
Gus Van Sant as himself, just in
like
quite
that.
a funny role.
Wes Craven.
You're a true artist, Gus.
There's a red flag of things to come in Kevin Smith's career, in that his daughter Harley Quinn portrays baby Silent Bob.
Oh, his wife's in it as well.
That's fine. Having your baby play a baby is fine, but yeah, he does put his wife in it, and she's not an actor, and she never claims to be. So it's not like we're slagging her off here. She does a perfectly fine job in this thing. But yeah.
And as I mentioned before, Will Ferrell's got quite a big role.
I forgot Will Ferrell was in this. Well,
no, I completely forgot as well.
I
think I think the world is much less a fan of Will Ferrell than I am. I think as something of a, without wanting to sound like a pretentious cunt, as something of a student of comedy who has like really dug into like comedy and how the craftsmanship behind it and admires it. I think Will Ferrell is
sound pretentious there.
I think Will Ferrell is a phenomenal talent, and like it doesn't always, he's made a lot of shit, and I think that's why he's perhaps not regarded as the talent that he is. But I think he's operating.
I agree with you to a certain extent.
Yeah,
for me, he's sort of like the Steve Martin of his more modern generation. In that, it's funny for a bit, and then everyone got a bit bored of it.
Yeah,
and there's probably lots of other stuff that he does, but he's stuck with that one thing that the world knows him for, and we're tired.
The thing with Will Ferrell is you can just leave him be, just let him do whatever without even having much time to think about it, and it will be like vaguely amusing. It'll be kind of funny. You get the impression, certainly if you are familiar with his work, almost everything that he comes out with in this film, I think, is improvised by Will Ferrell. There's a lot of takes used in the film where it looks like he's about to start cracking up, or other people around him are like laughing in a way that feels like authentic laughter rather than reacting to his joke. That not just with him, actually, with a few actors, there's a few points where it feels like they're using takes of people just corpsing because they were prattling around. But I think he operates at the level that this sort of kind of comedy operates at, like effortlessly, and I think as a result he's one of the better things in this film.
Well, I agree. I think he's fantastic in this, and this is probably one of the first things I ever saw him in. I'd probably seen him in the Austin Powers little role he does in that, but
yeah, I think that was
I
the
didn't
first
know
thing
who
I
he
ever
was
saw him in.
here. So yeah, I'm happy with this. I think we can talk about this later when we talk about Holmes and Watson. But I think what's happened with Will Ferrell is that he's just got away with it for too long, and so now there's no one sort of checking him. No one's saying, "Well, that's not funny. Actually, let's try something else." He just does. You're saying he does whatever he wants, but he's lost the sense of what works.
Well, I don't know.
So he just does anything.
I don't think he has.
It's mostly shouting.
I think Will Ferrell, one of the reasons I really like him is I think he does do a lot of weird little experimental projects that are actually really interesting, really funny conceptually, but they don't tend to be things that end up making loads of money, and the things that he ends up being well known for are the big money makers, not his little things on the side.
Yeah, that's fair enough, yeah. Because I know he did that thing in Spanish, didn't he? That nobody watched.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, again, like a quite arty kind of concept. Didn't work.
I assume that he wasn't really very well known for anything at this point. I assume he'd just done Saturday Night Live at this point.
I guess that's what he was doing. Yeah.
So this is probably one of his kind of breakout roles, I guess. When
definitely.
Saturday Night Live stars start doing films.
Oh, hang on, 2003, Old School and Elf. So there you go. That's his big breakthrough year.
I feel like he was established by the time Elf came, or not maybe as mainstream. Like I knew who he was before Elf came along.
But same year as
and
this,
I think
he
it
was in
Old
Zoolander.
School that did it. Like I say, Chris Rock's hilarious in this. I think Will Ferrell has got a lot of moments that are genuinely really funny, and like it's beyond stupid most of the time. His character, it's like in Dumb and Dumber, where it's so stupid it transcends stupidity and just comes around the other side. It's that scene where they've got them surrounded and then they dress up the orangutan as a kid and then just walk out and then he just lets them go and he's like, oh, that was them, wasn't it? Shit. It was just, it's so dumb, but I found it funny. And you know what really made me laugh was when they're on the set of Scream, one of the Scream films, and which is presumably why Jay and Silent Bob inexplicably appear in Scream 3 for a cameo.
Yeah. Something reason.
Which doesn't make sense in universe at all because it's a film and what I don't even know. But anyway, but then the orangutan's inexplicably in the Scream mask, and then someone comes over to Wes Craven and says like, "What the fuck is this?" And he's like, "Hey, the monkey tests really well. People love it." And then Jay and Silent Bob run in and go, "We love this monkey," and run off with it. And he goes, "What did I say?" It's just
that's Shannon Doherty who's in Mallrats. That is another cameo. It's not just.
Oh, okay.
I really find Jason Mewes to be very amusing, and so I like this film. And it is. There's loads of bits you like. There's loads of bits where you just think, I can't believe you're doing this. But because I have watched all the previous films, I know what's going on.
Yeah.
It works for me.
I think this is just, it throws enough shit at the screen that enough sticks to kind of get away with it, basically. I think objectively, it's Kevin Smith's worst film to date at this point. But subjectively, I get more out of it than... To be honest, I'd probably rather sit down and watch this than any of his films apart from Clerks, just on a personal level.
You see, I know what you're saying, and I agree to a certain extent, but it's the same. I could watch Mallrats just over and over again, whereas I wouldn't sit down and watch Clerks over and over again, even though it's a better film. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah. Funny, completely pointless, but that's okay. It's a stoner comedy. I give it 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd give it a 7 as well.
I mean,
it's a low 7, but yeah, it just about gets there for me.
Again, I feel like I have to explain my scoring a little bit because I don't hate it as much as the score might suggest. You know, there are plenty of bits in it that are funny. I probably quote
I think we're being very generous. I don't think you need to explain it if it's going to be lower than a 7.
But yeah, it's a 5 for me.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, sorry.
They are, of course, doing something of a follow-up to Jay and Silent Bob.
Jay and Silent Bob reboot. Well, it's been announced. Whether it'll actually film or not is another thing.
I think it is very much Kevin Smith's next project, which doesn't mean...
Yeah, I'm saying pre-production. So.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's 100% going to happen, but I think they're very close to cameras actually rolling on this one. It does seem like it's happening, so... Yeah.
Have you read the supposed plot?
Isn't it something like there's a new superhero movie or some shit? And
essentially it's Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, but he wants to do it better. There's a reboot or there's a sequel to the Bluntman and Chronic film, and they have to stop that from being made.
Right. So
but I mean, that's what it says on the internet, but that's apparently the plot.
What the fuck is the internet? It's funny. Jason Mewes is funny.
Yeah, I can't argue with you. I mean, just to put my 2 pence in, because I'm obviously not going to be here. I want to see Jay and Silent Bob growing up, I want to see the teen years where it can actually get away with being like a teen comedy.
Ooh, prequel.
Yeah, it's something along that lines. I think it'd work as a TV series, but that's where I would see it going.
I want to see Jay and Silent Bob Babies, like Baby's Day Out, based on the like 5 seconds at the start of this film before they grew up.
It's just Baby Jay shouting "fuck."
Yeah.
What about Jay and Silent Bob in an old people's home?
Oh my god. Oh my god. The thing is, so long as Jason Mewes lives long enough, that'll probably happen.
Yeah. What do you mean Jason Mewes lives long enough? What, Kevin Smith?
He's lost all the weight now.
He had a heart attack. That's why.
He's looking very healthy now, though, isn't he?
No, he looks gaunt. He looks like a fat man who's lost a load of weight.
No, I think he looks very healthy. He's gone vegan, hasn't he?
Has he?
It's the healthy.
Oh, no.
He's gone vegan purely because he's like not smart enough to eat a healthy diet unless he just kind of.
I mean, crisps are vegan.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's call it a day for this one. So that's first act of Kevin Smith. Be coming back next week, where we will be dealing with the sort of second bit of his career.
The awkward, middling attempt at the Hollywood mainstream.
Yeah, we'll be covering Jersey Girl, Clerks 2, Zack and Miri Make a Porno, and Cop Out, which was very much the sort of knife in his heart.
I liked Cop Out.
Well,
I'm saying it now. I liked Cop Out.
You liked Cop Out?
And I don't have to defend it because we're not talking about it.
You like Cop Out?
Yeah. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to defend it because I'm going to let you talk about it next week.
To be honest with you, I am looking forward to watching it again and just seeing what I can get out of it. Because I remember it not being terrible. Thanks for coming in, Ben.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
See you next week.